Testing 1 2 3. 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 Testing 1 2 3.
Introducing Introducing the UN
Good afternoon. I invite you to take your seats. My name is Martin Kimani. I direct Kenya's National Counterterrorism Center and have been working with the UN team to put together this event. And I wanted to say that we're now ending it. We're at the close of the meeting, and so this is where the rubber meets the road. And we have a very distinguished and informed panel of speakers, and I'm privileged to be co-chairing this with Ms. Bintu Keita, Assistant Secretary General for Africa at the United Nations Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and the Department of Peace Operations. We've divided our duties amongst ourselves, and I want to just make a few remarks in introduction to this session, which is on leveraging the African Union peace and security architecture and building a new partnership to strengthen national prevention and resilience while delivering sustainable development. The reason this combination of building prevention and focusing on sustainable development together is because African countries are needing to do a number of things simultaneously. One, to prevent and counter terrorism, while at the very same time delivering public goods and building up the state and all the other assets that our citizens expect us to be building. And these two are extremely difficult to do on a financial basis. So you find a lot of countries, we've heard over the last few days, countries talking sometimes about how much of their resources they're using to actually provide security and to counter terrorism. And at the very same time, some of the factors driving that insecurity and instability are because not enough is being invested in the social sectors, in the developmental sectors. And that creates a vicious cycle. So we do need new partnerships and new ways of working with the structures that we have available to us that allow us to do security more cost effectively, more effectively in operational terms, and that requires structures such as the African Union Peace and Security Architecture to be more responsive to our needs and to be and for us to be able to leverage it properly. It's a tall order, but it is a necessary order, because as we have learned, for those of us in countries like Kenya that are on the front lines of fighting Al-Qaeda affiliated groups, is that once you're in the fight, you find quickly that you have to reform entire systems of government and entire systems of security if you're to actually successfully take them on. For those countries that are not on the front lines, perhaps this conversation will help you immensely in allowing you to begin to reform and prepare so that you do not have to deal with the problem once it has arisen, but you're able to prevent it and thus are able to be much more cost effective and more effective at securing your country and your citizens. I will say no more because the panel here has a lot to share with you, but I want to urge you to do one thing, which is as you listen to the panelists, please recall your experiences since yesterday, what you've heard that has made you feel that that is a good idea that we can leverage on, that's a good idea that we can secure. Because when we open the floor, there are a number of countries that will be making some statements, but further on, you will be able to press on your button and get on the queue to speak. Please, I urge you, contribute ideas that you think are practical, that can change the perspective or how we do the work that we do, and ideas that you've heard over the last 2 days that you think require a greater airing, so that we can be able to have some action items to take forward, because ultimately we've had a great exchange, but we do have to take this forward in a practical and impactful manner. So thank you very much. We have the privilege of, your agenda doesn't show it, but we've been joined by Mr. Idris Munir, who is a Deputy Director of the African Union Center for the Study and Research on Terrorism. Idris and I go back many years. He's one of the most knowledgeable people about this architecture and a great thinker about how this center can be more focused and deliver more to member states. And he has done an immensely good job at it. And he will be able to now give us an overview so that we're able to talk into the structure that he paints for us. Because I always find that just when you think you know the structure well, you find that it has assets and dimensions that bear closer examination. Idris, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I will be up to the standards of the picture you painted of me. Allow me, first of all, since I'm taking the floor for the first time, to thank the government of Kenya and the United Nations Office on Counterterrorism for successfully holding this high-level regional conference. As you kindly indicated, it goes without saying that since we're talking about the African peace and security architecture, it's a duty from the African Union to brief you on this architecture, to allow you now to relate to it when you're making your comments, and also linking what I'm going to present to the presentations that will follow. The Africa Peace and Security Architecture, as enshrined in the Peace and Security Protocol, embraces an expanded and comprehensive agenda for peace and security that includes direct and structural conflict prevention, early warning and prevention, preventive diplomacy, peacemaking, and peace building, the encouragement and promotion of democratic processes, as well as intervention and humanitarian action and disaster management. The APSA, as we refer to it, is therefore based on 5 pillars. The Peace and Security Council, the center of major decision-making on peace and security on the continent. The Panel of the Wise, the Continental Early Warning System, to which member states and regions are connected to the African Union Situation Room through their national and regional early warning centers, the African Standby Force, and finally, the Peace Fund. Not only does the APSA deal with a wide range of issues, but it also involves a wide range of stakeholders and organizations. Bringing all these stakeholders to work in a coordinated, and here I have to highlight the word coordinated manner, is a key condition to increase the probability that the expected results be achieved and fully achieved. In order to optimize fully these partnerships, the principle of subsidiarity, complementarity, and comparative advantage is promoted and applied to achieve durable peace and sustainable development. It is these same principles that guide and should guide our work, whether we're talking about national level, regional, or continental level cooperation. It is important to note that the Africa Peace and Security Architecture should not be read alone, but should be read in the framework of the African Union Constitutive Act, that not only promotes peace, security, and stability on the continent, but it also promotes democratic principles and institutions, popular participation, and good governance. In that regard, one should also make reference to the African governance architecture, which we don't talk much about, and the African governance, and the African Charter on the values and principles of decentralization, local governance, and local development. In particular, as we are talking and trying to address issues in relation to the prevention of violent extremism. Over the past years, and in order to address the scourges of terrorism and violent extremism, the African Union adopted and is guided by a range of policy and legally binding instruments. The African Union approach has also continuously adapted to the ever-changing nature and manifestation of terrorism on the continent, as well as the global peace, security, and development agendas. In this respect, the African Union developed a range of institutions, mechanisms, and innovative tools that the chairperson yesterday made reference to in his opening remarks. These institutions and tools and initiatives respond to the threat of terrorism and violent extremism within the wider APSA, or Africa Peace and Security Architecture, of which, CAIRT is at the center of all this African. CAIRT is the African Center for the Study and Research on Terrorism. For those of you who are not familiar with the French acronym, is at the center of the African Union Counterterrorism agenda, as it is the technical arm of the Peace and Security Department for research analysis on terrorism and capacity building. When we try to address, the issue of how we can strengthen the African peace and security architecture on counterterrorism and violent extremism, there are 4 keywords that spring to mind: coordination, cooperation, harmonization, and then capacity building. Chair, if you allow me, since we have member states in the room and we have regions, I will focus on how we can enhance partnership and continue partnership with our partners, and allow me to take notes, while our member states and regions are proposing recommendations on how we can assist them as African Union Commission in their endeavor within the APSA. In relationship to partnerships, I think there is a need to continue supporting, and we already thank all the partners that are contributing financially but also technically in assisting the African Union in implementing APSA in its all pillars and in accordance with its strategic roadmap. We are actually in the finalization of the implementation of 2016-2020 strategic roadmap. And hopefully at the end of this process, then we will go back to the to have a review of what we have implemented, what we have delivered, review the challenges that we had faced, and propose a new strategic roadmap for the implementation of APSA itself. So we do call on our partners to continue supporting the implementation of the strategic roadmap of APSA, to also provide the technical assistance needed based on needs assessment and the discussions and dialogue that you have to have, or at least from our point of view, need to have with member states, need to happen. It's not because something is a priority internationally, it is indeed a priority on the continent. It's very important wherever and whichever technical assistance programs that are proposed fit and respond to the urgency identified by the member states, by the regions themselves. Therefore, there is a need to calibrate the technical assistance programs efforts or programs offered to the local context, ensuring local ownership and local leadership with the ultimate objective of sustainable capacity building, but also sustainable development. To share information and intelligence with the African Union institutions, whether it's CAIRT, AFRIPOL, or CISA, in relation to the threat of terrorism, but also call on our partners to share information about terrorist groups, in particular in this context of foreign terrorism fighters that have left your countries to Iraq and Syria and might make their way to the continent. We have been requested by the Peace and Security Council to compile a list of such individuals, and I will take and I'll seize this opportunity, the opportunity of this meeting to request that you share with our member states the list of your nationals that went to Syria and Iraq that could make their way to Africa, exasperating the security situation on the continent, but also could be the ones that will be targeting your own nationals, but on the continent. There is also a need to involve and promote a whole society, a whole of government approach to PVE. And here we have to agree on how to develop such an approach or translate such an approach critically, because developmental programs will take a long time to implement. So we have to see how we will balance off development on one end and then pressing security issues on the other, gradually moving towards building this whole society, whole of government approach. It doesn't happen from one day to another. So we have to be very patient, in particular, in this environment where the resources are quite scarce. I would end by making two recommendations, at least from the point of view of our colleagues from the United Nations, is to start looking within Africa. It's important. Africa has a lot to offer in terms of best practices, in terms of good experiences in countering terrorism. And when I look up counterterrorism best practices on the UN websites, I don't see any African member states being mentioned. And I think the international community could do a lot by learning how Africa is dealing with terrorism, with violent extremism, and how it's managing successes on the ground, despite its financial and economic challenges that it has to face day in, day out. I wish to also seize this opportunity to call on the United Nations Office on Counterterrorism to multiply such initiatives, such gathering that allows us to speak and be able to share with you our African perspective, African challenges, and also inform you about the successes that we're registering on the ground. It's all, as I said, about collaboration, about coordination, and then about harmonizing our approach to counterterrorism. With that, Chair, I hope I did not go beyond my 6 minutes, and I will end it to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that informative and sweeping overview of the architecture that we're talking about. I want to welcome the next speaker, who is General Francis Boniface Benzene, who is a Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security in the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, who will also deliver his remarks for 6 minutes or less. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm General Francis Benzene, ECOWAS citizen coming from Benin Republic. Je voudrais, au nom de la supranationalité de la CEDEAO, qui compte 15 États, à savoir le Bénin, le Burkina Faso, la Côte d'Ivoire, le Cap-Vert, le Ghana, la Guinée-Bissau, la Gambie, le Mali, le Niger, le Nigeria, le Libéria, la Sierra Leone, le Sénégal et le Togo. Au nom de ces 15 pays, je voudrais, au nom du président de la Commission, M. Jean Cassibrou, dire merci à la République du Kenya et aux Nations Unies de nous avoir invités. Le président aurait bien voulu être ici, mais compte tenu de son agenda très chargé, il m'a demandé de le représenter. Je suis commissaire aux affaires politiques, paix et sécurité de la CEDEAO. Tirer parti de l'architecture de paix et de sécurité de l'Union africaine et créer un nouveau partenariat visant à renforcer la prévention et la résilience au niveau national tout en assurant le développement rural, durable. Rural, parce que le terrorisme a lieu dans nos communes rurales, dans nos villages, donc il n'est pas exagéré de parler de rural. Et après l'intervention du directeur adjoint du CAERT, M. Idriss Moody, au sujet de l'architecture de paix et de sécurité, il n'y a plus grand-chose à dire. Mais il convient de rappeler que du point de vue de l'Union africaine, le lien entre la paix, la sécurité, la prévention, la résilience et le développement durable est représenté dans la vision panafricaine d'une Afrique intégrée, prospère et en paix. Une Afrique conduite par ses propres citoyens et représentant une force dynamique dans l'arène internationale. C'est notamment cette vision qui est traduite par l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine, l'Afrique que nous voulons. La mise en œuvre de cette vision repose sur le cadre formel constitué par l'architecture de paix et de sécurité de l'Union africaine, APSA. Cette dernière repose elle-même sur les 5 régions géographiques du continent africain, à savoir la région de l'Est, de l'Ouest, du Nord, du Sud et du Centre, qui doivent chacune fournir une structure intégrant des composantes militaires, civiles et police. Les 5 structures constituent la force en attente de l'Union africaine et à côté de la force en attente de l'Union africaine, l'APSA, l'architecture de paix et de sécurité, regroupe un Conseil de paix et de sécurité, CPS, un groupe des sages, un fonds pour la paix, un système d'alerte précoce. L'Afrique, l'Union africaine est dotée d'une compétence continentale, comme vous le savez. De même, l'Union africaine reconnaît l'existence de 8 communautés économiques régionales, CER, et 2 mécanismes régionaux. En réalité, cette reconnaissance des régions, les CER et les mécanismes régionaux posent un problème du point de vue institutionnel et du point de vue de la distribution des rôles en matière de paix et de sécurité. Mais je dis, heureusement, une bonne clarification est intervenue lors des travaux du dernier sommet du 8 juillet à Niamey de l'Union africaine, après des concertations productives entre le président de la Commission de l'Union africaine, qui est passé ici hier, et les secrétaires exécutifs et secrétaires généraux et présidents des communautés économiques régionales et des mécanismes régionaux. Cette clarification a abouti le 8 juillet dernier, c'est-à-dire il y a quelques jours, à l'adoption d'un ensemble de recommandations relatives aux relations entre l'Union africaine et les communautés économiques régionales, a abouti à un protocole portant amendement du protocole de 2008 sur les relations entre l'Union africaine et les CER, et d'un projet de règlement intérieur de la réunion annuelle de coordination entre l'Union africaine et les CER. Ces documents sont ici, si vous avez envie, quand vous lisez certaines parties, on vous le dira. Mais il convient de disséminer assez rapidement et de mettre en œuvre plus tôt cette clarification des rôles. J'étais témoin pour avoir participé aux côtés de mon président à cette réunion de clarification. Les séries de responsabilités dans le cadre de la préservation de la paix et de la sécurité du niveau mondial à partir des Nations Unies au niveau national, État, passant par les niveaux continental, Union africaine et régionale, CER, mécanismes régionaux, s'articulent autour de 3 principes fondamentaux: la subsidiarité, la complémentarité et les avantages comparatifs, tels que dérivés du chapitre 8 de la Charte des Nations Unies. Cependant, il faut reconnaître en pratique le défaut d'interprétation officielle du principe de subsidiarité a posé beaucoup de problèmes quant à sa mise en œuvre sur le terrain et entraîne le plus souvent une concurrence plutôt qu'une complémentarité entre l'Union africaine et les CER. Il y a souvent des dédoublements de programmes et d'activités. Il est opportun également de constater que l'APSA, architecture de paix et de sécurité de l'Union africaine, correspond à un modèle de réponse adapté au contexte prévalant dans le cadre des conflits, ayant présidé à l'adoption des mécanismes du maintien de la paix tels que suggérés par l'application du chapitre 7 de la Charte des Nations Unies. Mais la nature des conflits ayant profondément évolué, passant des conflits interétatiques aux conflits intra-étatiques, passant des guerres classiques entre troupes armées à des guerres dites asymétriques, le terrorisme, avec la démultiplication innommable de la criminalité transnationale organisée, trafic de drogue, d'armes, de personnes, piraterie, etc., la radicalisation et l'extrémisme violent et le terrorisme. Nous nous arrêterons là pour dire que tout ceci entraîne une fragilisation poussée de nos États, avec des risques multidimensionnels, interconnectés, économiques, environnementaux, politiques, sécuritaires et sociétales, et d'une faible capacité de nos États à gérer ou à atténuer ces risques dans la réalisation débouche sur des crises et des conflits. Dans ce contexte, la formule de tout sécurité, défense n'est plus suffisante pour le règlement des conflits. Il est désormais nécessaire de recourir à des approches beaucoup plus holistiques, et depuis hier, nous en avons entendu de formelles et d'informelles, associations de la société civile, le secteur privé, etc., pour que nous puissions, par la prévention, arrêter tous les éléments favorables à l'apparition de la radicalisation et de l'extrémisme violent menant au terrorisme. Ces actions devront se faire de manière concomitante, coordonnée, aux mesures destinées à la réalisation du développement rural. Mais il faut en même temps doter les États des capacités nécessaires pour faire preuve de résilience par rapport à l'avènement de l'extrémisme violent récurrent. D'où la recherche d'un mécanisme de financement pour la prévention et la lutte contre le terrorisme. C'est notamment dans ce cadre de l'expansion de la fragilité que de nouvelles visions ont été développées par les divers cercles concentriques concernés par la prévention, la gestion et la résolution des conflits en Afrique. L'ONU a lancé l'agenda 2030, transformer notre monde, les objectifs pour le développement rural, durable, ODD. Rural parce que la déléguée du Burkina Faso nous a fait l'état des statistiques qui sont écœurants. L'Afrique, l'Union africaine a mis en place son agenda 2063, l'Afrique que nous voulons. Et la CEDEAO a développé la vision 2020, c'est-à-dire l'année prochaine, pour une communauté démocratique et prospère. Tous ces instruments, ci-dessus énumérés, ambitionnent la même chose, placer l'individu au centre du développement humain. Le nouveau paradigme de gestion des crises impose qu'on prévienne les crises ou leur résurgence en soutenant l'inclusion et la résilience. La prévention recouvre les actions de pérennisation de la paix. La résilience des États et des sociétés, comprise dans un sens large, recouvre non seulement les capacités d'absorption, mais aussi celles d'adaptation et de transformation. Le soutien aux actions de prévention devrait s'inscrire dans l'inclusion à tous les niveaux. Dans cette optique, la CEDEAO a notamment développé sa stratégie de contre-terrorisme articulée autour de 3 piliers, que sont la prévention, la poursuite et la reconstruction, ainsi que la stratégie Sahel construite autour de 4 piliers, à savoir les infrastructures de transport, la résilience et la sécurité alimentaire, l'éducation, les mesures d'appui à la paix et la sécurité et la gouvernance en faveur du développement. Voilà, chers amis, chers participants, très brièvement situer l'architecture de paix et de sécurité inscrite dans la prévention du crime violent, notamment renforcer la prévention et la résilience au niveau national, tout en assurant le développement durable. Je vous remercie de votre attention. Vous savez qu'à la fin d'une mission comme celle-ci, quand on revient du sommet de l'Union africaine, et avant cela, le sommet de la CEDEAO, on est un peu fatigué, mais on s'accroche. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, General Benzene. Now, for the speakers coming up, I will be much stricter than the General because the General and I have a very old friendship from a few minutes ago, so I couldn't interrupt him. But for the rest of the panel, I will interrupt so that we can get a chance to hear from the member states and also from the other participants, and then we can have a dialogue that is able to be more productive. Let me introduce the next panelist, who is Mr. Moody Aguila, who's the Director General of the Counterterrorism Fusion and Analysis Agency of the Republic of Botswana. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I will certainly compensate for lost time. My speech will be very short. As I am speaking for the first time, let me express my sincere gratitude and heartfelt appreciation to the government of Kenya and the United Nations Office of Counter-Terrorism for organizing this momentous conference. It is an honor for me and my delegation to be part of this. Botswana will benefit immensely from this conference. I'll move out of here with contacts of all people and entities the country needs in order to successfully establish its National Counter-Terrorism Fusion and Analysis Agency. I must disclose right from the onset that for matters relating to terrorism, Botswana is a new kid in the block. I'm therefore not going to claim that I can share any experiences with you on terrorism. We have no such experience. It is, however, a common cause that the threat of terrorism is real and that it is growing at a very rapid rate and will soon affect all parts of the world, including Southern Africa and Botswana. It is in realization of this that Botswana, as a member state of not only regional organizations, but also an active player in world affairs, finds it fit to be part of the rest of the world in combating terrorism. The African Union Peace and Security Architecture Roadmap 2016-2020 details amongst its strategic priority areas strategic security issues such as counter-terrorism, illicit financial flows, as well as transnational organized crime and coordination and partnerships. It is partly in this light that Botswana finds herself compelled to be part of this roadmap. As such, we now have developed structures to implement these imperatives. The newly approved National Counter-Terrorism Fusion and Analysis Agency will be a vehicle through which the country will be able to interact with other similarly mandated institutions in other countries to combat the menace of terrorism. This organization, therefore, being newly born, has to find its feet to stand on and eyes to see its way through the dark and perilous realm of counterterrorism. Once again, I call upon willing, experienced mentors to assist us in the establishment of this institution. We do not have to reinvent the wheel. Why should we when the wheel already exists? All we have to do is find somebody who has it and is willing to show it to us so that we can make our own. We will, of course, adapt it to our own set of circumstances so that we can be able to roll it within the dictates of our environment. Let me stop here after making this appeal and let those who can share with us their experiences and lessons learned from dealing with terrorists do their noble part. Thank you.
Director General, congratulations on establishing this important institution, and thank you for welcoming the ideas and input of African countries. African countries have learned a lot in this fight. They have a lot to share, and all of them, whenever you ask another African country to share with you some of what it does, the response is usually extremely generous. So I'm sure there are many in the audience who even now are thinking, how can I engage better to help you so that in future you do it for someone else. So congratulations. Let me welcome the next speaker, who is Mr. Yele Posma, who is the Chief, Countering Terrorist Travel Program and Aviation Security for the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism. Mr. Yele, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you indeed. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, for giving me this opportunity to elaborate on this new flagship program of the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism and discuss with you our proposal for regional cooperation. We will start with a short video clip.
Introducing the UN Countering Terrorist Travel Program, a new flagship initiative of the United Nations Office of Counter-Terrorism in partnership with Counter-Terrorism Committee Executive Directorate, International Civil Aviation Organization, Office of Information and Communications Technology, and United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Over the centuries, finding new ways to improve our mobility has been one of humanity's greatest achievements, bringing us together, broadening our perspectives, and replacing our fears of the unknown with a sense of hope and adventure. At the same time, with increased global mobility, greater security threats have come to our doorsteps. Terrorists and serious criminals have taken their activities to new heights and far across national borders, taking advantage of the sheer multitude of travelers by blending into the crowd. This challenge is not new, but it is imminently more significant as thousands of foreign terrorist fighters are on the move to join new conflict zones, plot or receive training in foreign territories, or possibly return home to go underground and carry on their insidious agenda. The global community urgently needs more proficient and reliable ways to identify and track terrorists and serious criminals among the sea of other dots on our radar, prior, during, and after travel. We have one potential advantage on our side. When terrorists arrange and execute their travel, they are briefly exposed and vulnerable. With the right information, member states will have the power to identify and track down known and suspected terrorists and criminals, expose their concealed networks, and better anticipate and prevent planned attacks. But how? You will need the technology and resources to collect the right information from large streams of passenger data, detecting new or hidden threats using risk indicators and cross-checking this against relevant databases to zero in on appropriate and actionable information. And finally, efficiently liaise with national authorities to provide timely alerts that are sent to the right national or international desk. This requires a dedicated, well-trained tracking team called a Passenger Information Unit. The PIU is built on sound legal and governance structures, drawing on experienced and well-trained operators, operating a state-of-the-art ICT solution that enables detection through the fusion of multi-agency talent and cross-checking of multiple datasets. Once the connection helps zero in on known or newly identified suspects, the PIU then tracks them and alerts the relevant authorities for swift action or further analysis. Enabling this solution is the precise purpose of the UN Countering Terrorist Travel Program, a new flagship initiative of the United Nations Office of Counter-Terrorism. In line with the international obligations for all member states following Security Council Resolutions 2178 and 2396, the program provides interested countries with a tailor-made comprehensive support package. This includes national deep dive expert assessments and a comprehensive roadmap for implementation, legislative assistance to ensure maximum operational flexibility, privacy and data protection by design, compliance with international human rights law, as well as cooperation with the transport industry, institutional setup and operationalization of PIUs, where governance and sustainable ownership on ministerial level can be established, and operational staff trained to ensure the unit is embedded into existing national law enforcement. And finally, the provision of a leading-edge software system. GoTravel is a reconfigured version of the travel information portal system donated by the Kingdom of Netherlands to the UN, a unique solution provided to all interested member states. GoTravel will help countries to centrally collect, store, analyze, and disseminate their own data, make new detections using risk indicators, and match data with watch lists of known terrorists. It should be noted that the UN will not collect, store, or retain any data, and national authorities remain in full possession and control. In partnership with CTED, OICT, ICAO, and UNODC, in an all-of-UN approach, and in close cooperation with international organizations like Interpol, dedicated to counterterrorism and anti-crime, the UN Countering Terrorist Travel Program and its partners stand side by side with member states in building your new effective detection capability. Together, we will create a safer world without sacrificing the freedom of exploring our beautiful planet.
So this very practical new program, the Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, launched last month, and we are now assisting other countries on a global scale to build their own national detection capacity, to identify. I'm sorry that my clicker doesn't seem to cover the space. I will switch microphones if you don't mind, sorry.
You only have 30 seconds.
I was told that the film didn't count. I will proceed. I will spare you the examples, the practical operational examples, where this methodology was vital in prevention and reconstruction and the detection of plots, terrorist attacks. We are indeed now frequently talking about the foreign terrorist fighters flow. One day they left and another day they returned, but this is not something new. It's something that is not only related to foreign terrorist fighters, movement of terrorists and serious and organized criminals, including their victims, when we're talking about people trafficking. We all benefit from this methodology. I will proceed to the most important part, as we are today and yesterday talking about regional cooperation, multilateralism. We are indeed, with this program, following an all-of-UN approach, making full use of the big mandates given to the different parts of the United Nations. We help countries in building their fusion centers or using existing ones and further expanding the possibilities of acquiring new sets of information. You see on the left-hand side, personal data, data on networks, and in the center, a new fusion center, perform an analysis of the data to detect threats we already knew and, for example, were flagged in national databases or those international ones from, for example, Interpol, and also identify new threats because certain risk indicators combined indicate new threats coming towards your territories. To please the audience and make interaction possible, I will proceed to the most important part. This is the part where we talk about regional cooperation. Because building this methodology is a complex challenge per member state. Each member state, under Security Council Resolution 2396 and 2178, have the obligation in building this national detection capacity. But especially the regional cooperation and the exchange of information is vital for everyone's safety and security. The countries that are already up and running and experienced are very much willing to help those that are just starting. I've experienced it myself. Years ago, I didn't know anything about this, but fortunately others were there to help. And more with this new international obligation are building this capacity. And trust me, the community is warm and very welcome to newcomers and together stand strong. This is why we have established a global pool of experts making themselves available in their spare time to help those countries that request it. We, of course, as the UN, play a facilitating role in that, and my program and my team stand ready to assist you as well. But this is being enforced by this pool of experts. And then the final part, and I'm really happy that I've spoken with many of you these past days, and I hope I will proceed this dialogue with you, to establish regional informal working groups. It is very important that all over the world, countries do not feel alone, and that within the region, They share good practices on setting up this enormous task and exchange good practices on legislation, for example, making sure that there is some sort of level playing field with the neighbors, making sure that you can indeed exchange information. Having similar forms and shapes of fusion centers where different organizations, national organizations, work together. And finally, have a similar technical platform, in the end enabling interoperability between the units, making sure that we make full use of these regional platforms. We will support you with the establishment of a digital platform where you can cooperate together. And of course, we will also support you in setting up this informal working group structure, as the UN will not be the owner of this. This is the countries that in the end are the owners, of course. This is your sovereign task, your own national security, but we are, of course, here to support and to facilitate this in any way possible. So please reach out to us, and we'll make sure that you receive the assistance you require. Thank you very much.
Mr. Postma, thank you for that very, very practical reflection, and congratulations on the launch of this program, and through you to USG Voronkov. This sort of practical, impactful work is work that so many of us want the United Nations to do more of. And I can see this approach of this fusion and this approach even relating to counter-messaging, to all forms of things we need to be doing together. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a strong conversation with the CAIET people, because there are some joint things that I recognized in both your presentations that you can help all of us by collaborating. It's my privilege to welcome Dr. Lydia Uma, who's the Executive Director, Gender Awareness Trust, National Coordinator for the Network on Security and Peace for Women in ECOWAS. Dr. Uma, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and if I may add, in the ECOWAS region, so that no one thinks I work for ECOWAS. The civil society organizations working in the area of peace and security, but in the ECOWAS region. Thank you very much. Distinguished chair and colleagues on the panel, let me join others to thank the United Nations and, of course, the government and the people of Kenya for hosting this very important conference. And permit me also to extend my thanks to the UN Women that have made it possible for me to be here by extending an invitation. I want to add a little bit on my introduction to say that I'm coming from a civil society organization background, having worked in Gender Awareness Trust for about 20 years and now coordinating the program for NOPSWECO. My statement of proposals are briefly presented in 4 sections, and I'll take them very quickly. The first one is focus on the priorities for strengthening the African peace and security architecture to counter terrorism and prevent violent extremism. These are the 2 recommendations that I would like to prefer. The first is that member states of the African Union must endeavor to domesticate the African Union Resolution 2457 of 2019 of silencing the gun initiative by 2020. But this must be backed up with budgetary allocation. National plans should align with regional economic commissions and the regional mechanisms, while leveraging on partnerships with civil society organizations for the effective implementation of the initiative in the continent. My second proposal is that decision-making in the African Union needs to be strengthened by having a strong management team made up of heads of regional economic commissions and the AU. This will facilitate free flow of implementation of decisions on this particular initiative. The second is the decisions and recommendations of the 2018 AU High-Level Meeting on combating terrorist financing in Africa. And I propose that there is a need to set up regional financial intelligence units within the RECs to monitor activities of the national financial intelligence units across member states, leveraging on the global counter-terrorism strategy. This is imperative. Secondly, the national financial intelligence units in the member states need to, as a matter of importance, be strengthened to perform forensic exercise on money laundering. Thirdly, there is need for regional economic commissions to emulate the recently approved ECOWAS decision on single currency and personal verification number strategy for effective monitoring and movement of monies by national central banks. Furthermore, there should be judicial cooperation between member states. This needs to be strengthened. And lastly, in this section, the African Union must prioritize addressing porous borders to control the influx of small arms and light weapons used in generating funds by terrorist groups. The third section has to do with the ways the African peace and security architecture can be enhanced to ensure a sustained, cooperative, and coordinated approach to transnational terrorism. This includes, first, transforming borderland communities into zones of economic development. This initiative could facilitate cross-border trade as well as strengthen local governance. Secondly, the capacity of more women need to be built and strengthened to engage in regional and national mediation. Lastly, in this section, the informal forces, that is the militias that are complementing security forces, need to be regulated and integrated into formal structures through security sector reform. The first and the last section, distinguished chair, colleagues, and participants, have to do with counter-terrorism policies and nation-building strategies. My first proposal here is that where peace architectures are absent, this should be established at national levels. And where they are existing, they should be strengthened while integrating counter-terrorism and preventing violent extremism into peace education curriculum in schools. 2, adequate allocation of resources to support peace and security efforts at the level of regional organizations, state and civil society organizations is imperative. Local ownership of national early warning response centers by member states is very key. Next, strengthening the capacity and efforts of regional, national, and local networks, including women groups working in peace and security to support women returnees from captivity or trafficking, women in refugee camps and IDPs, and de-radicalization. I have examples of regional civil society organizations that work in this area, like PAVE, that is the Partnership Against Violence Extremism, the Network on Peace and Security in the ECOWAS region, that is NOPSWECO, the Working Group of UNOWAS on Women, Youth, Peace and Security, that is in the West Africa and the Sahel, UNOWAS. Regional economic commissions to engage national decision makers through high-level dialogue on how to strengthen and identify weak linkages between early warning and early response, as responses are usually weaker than early warning. Permit me, Mr. Chair, to take advantage of this chair to quickly remind us that while we are talking about countering terrorism and preventing violent extremism, we must remember and we should bring to our minds daily that, and we cannot forget, that there are girls that were kidnapped from Chibok, 297 of them, 5 years ago. It is important to remember that about 100 of them are still in captivity. And also to remember that among the girls that were kidnapped in Dapchi, there is still one that is hanging. I think we need to constantly remember this. Finally, Mr. Chairman, criminal justice systems and the rule of law must be strengthened to address such serious crimes in line with international law. I appreciate this opportunity to present my statement, and I thank you for listening.
Dr. Uma, thank you very much for that presentation. Let me first, I think the problem has been fixed. There was a bit of a noise coming from your speakers. Apologies for that. If it comes back, double apologies. I want to thank this panel and all the speakers, really not just for telling us about their specific story, but allowing us to see how we can improve this architecture and make it more responsive to us. There was a lot of practical and penetrating proposals that came from them, and I hope that when it's your turn, you will have a chance to also contribute at that level of quality and thoughtfulness. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let me hand over to my co-chair, Ms. Keita, to take us the rest of the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Co-Chair. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I know it's now the last leg of the conference, but I want to seize the occasion to thank, first of all, the government of Kenya for hosting this conference. Indeed, back in February 2019, this year, I met Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kenya in Addis, and she was mentioning that one of the first priority was to see what to do and what the international support could bring in terms of counter-terrorism and prevention of violence extremism. And so I'm very happy that our colleagues from the UNOCT, the Office of Counter-Terrorism, have organized this conference in Kenya and in Nairobi, and inviting all of Africa to be here for this meeting. So thank you for the partnership which has brought this conference to bear. Now, my responsibility as a co-chair is to walk you through the part which is now looking at the interaction from the floor, but allow me a few remarks because as at the beginning, I didn't say anything because I wanted to listen. And we've been encouraged by the co-chair to reflect on day one and also what has been said today. One thing which is important in terms of the APSA, the African Architecture for Peace, I believe we've clearly heard that the structure can be strengthened and empowered. And two things come to mind. One is around women engagement, and I think efforts have been already made, and we have also, with the panel of WISE, we have now FemWISE, and I think it's important to recognize that this is something which has been moving forth. We also have heard yesterday our young youth special envoy, and clearly this is also another way where the architecture is recognizing and taking into consideration the voice of the youth. So in other words, expansion of the architecture with new elements that maybe were not foreseen at the beginning of the building of the structure. So these two things. And then there is another element which I believe is important to take into consideration, which I heard, and I think it's important to put it back, because it's not just about the people who have died in the matter of the attacks of the terrorist group. It's also how we handle when it comes to the offensive and the operation, counterterrorism operation, how we manage the communication, and particularly with the population and the public management, which I would say crisis communication should be part of how we handle, states are handling the relationship with the population, with the citizen, so then they are also part and sensitized to how the fight can be won. Because one thing I heard in the 2 days is when we start ceding territory, then it's already a beginning of something which is very difficult because of the multi-layered complexities we will have to manage, and we are having to manage. Now, in this session, it was about leveraging. And looking at leveraging from the United Nations part, we have 2 frameworks that we have signed with the African Union. One which is really the strengthening of the peace and security architecture where the UN is supporting, and including counterterrorism and prevention of violent extremism. And in the other part, which is about the political economic governance, having the sustainable development goals as part of what needs to happen, not just in terms of longer term, but also mutualization of the efforts in order to deliver some of the basics that will create the resilience capacity for the communities. And I've heard the word local governance, which is for me one of the keys that we need to take and move forward with. So with that, 2 frameworks that we've signed, and this conference is a clear demonstration of that partnership with the African Union. I believe that there are still some elements which can be expanded. And I've heard elements which were shared with us, which is best practices. How can we increase the visibility of operations that are taking place on the continent with different modalities? And I want to put them here because I have not heard much about them. The G5 Joint Force Sahel is one of such arrangements. The second is the MNGTF, the multinational joint task force about combating Boko Haram. And we also have AMISOM. So we have already instruments and tools that we are using on the continent to combat terrorism. And I believe when we are looking at how we can build on and leverage, these are some of the things that we should be looking at enhancing. Also, when we look at the elements of justice and human rights as part of what needs to happen to avoid what is creating the exclusion, marginalization, and discrimination that people feel, be it young, elderly people or disabled people, because we had various groups that came to us and say, we have to look at inclusivity in order to avoid as much as possible the grievances that then led to some of the worst form of violence that we see as part of what we have to handle afterwards. So with this, and I see my co-chair looking at already his watch, but I just wanted to seize the occasion and say, best practices, visibility of the actions that are already taking place on the continent, making sure that they are visible on the website of the United Nations, making sure also that when it comes to the young people engagement and involvement, that we are not forgetting that they also need to be reinforced in terms of capacity. Same with the women. Next time around that we have special envoys that are nominated, I hope they will come from FemWise and not just a panel of WISE. So, which will mean that we will be walking the talk in terms of the gender, both men and women, giving hands in order to fight what we need to fight all together. And finally, some of the other elements that I've heard is about where are we going to take forward the aspect of coaching and mentoring when it comes to the fear, freedom from fear. When we heard Botswana and what they want to do, this talk about coaching and mentoring, not reinventing the wheel. So with that in mind, what are the partnerships that can be enabled and becoming a path for enabling others to learn and not, as mentioned by the panelists, not reinventing the wheel. And with these elements and looking at the financial aspect of how we deal with all of this, I believe that we need really to walk the talk in terms of the resources. And as part of the United Nations Secretary General elements in how to support all of this, the access to asset contribution for some of the operations on the continent have been already mentioned several times, but we don't have yet an understanding from the Security Council in order to get to that place. And I believe also the partnership between the two councils, the AU Peace and Security Council and the Security Council, is important as part of the way we can move forward in creating that better understanding. If I take Niger, I just came back from Niamey, when I listened to the Minister of Defense or the Minister of Interior telling me that in 2011 they had 33 million of francs CFA invested in their security sector. And 2018, they had 150 million of francs CFA invested in their security sector. Just this is giving you the nature of the challenges they are faced with. And they are kind of doing whatever they can already, but they need the support and the solidarity to come and help with what they do. So taking back now my role as looking at what can be the questions around how do we go about the leveraging, I hope that each one who is going to take the floor is going to be very practical in what is being shared in terms of recommendation. And unlike my co-chair who said that he's going to cut if it's exceeding 3 minutes, I'm going to do that. And I want to be forgiven in advance. If you see me doing this, it means please wrap up, it's finished. We are in agreement? So this is now the exercise with the statements. Let's see. Yes, so our first speaker from the floor is the member state Burundi with Mrs. Epiphanie Kabushemeye. I'm sorry for the pronunciation of the name, Nwantiwana, Director General in charge of Multilateral Relations, Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Burundi.
Je vous remercie, Madame coprésidente, pour la parole. Sur ce sujet, ma délégation voudrait souligner qu'une nation, un pays, vit toujours en relation avec les autres peuples et pays dans le cadre de la sous-région, de la région et dans le cadre mondial. La prévention de la lutte contre le terrorisme et l'extrémisme violent pouvant conduire au terrorisme au Burundi se fait dans le cadre de la coopération tant régionale qu'internationale, au sein des communautés dans lesquelles il fait partie, que ce soit la communauté de l'Afrique de l'Est ou l'Afrique centrale, mais aussi à travers certains accords qu'il a signés et aussi profite des mécanismes mis en place par l'Union africaine comme le CART ou alors d'autres services de renseignement. L'architecture de paix et de sécurité de l'Union africaine effectivement offre des canaux de lutte contre le terrorisme, mais aussi les communautés économiques sont dotées des mêmes services et offre un cadre de partage d'informations importantes qui peuvent aider dans la lutte contre le terrorisme. L'exploitation à bon escient de ces données permettrait aux États membres de prendre des mesures appropriées dans la lutte contre le terrorisme, établir la paix, la sécurité et la bonne gouvernance, conditions préalables pour un développement économique qui est basé sur l'intérêt de l'être humain. Sinon, on ne serait pas en train de parler du terrorisme. Avec les alertes précoces à plusieurs niveaux et la compréhension commune des cas, chaque pays serait en mesure de vivre en paix et en tranquillité et s'attellerait au développement économique. Pourtant, tout le monde est conscient du budget énorme chaque fois alloué à la sécurité, parfois en sacrifiant d'autres secteurs pourtant vitaux. L'ordre national, régional ou mondial serait assuré, n'eût été des intérêts inavoués des uns et des autres, de pécher dans des eaux troubles et le non-respect des accords conclus entre les États. Ma délégation voudrait proposer que concrètement, ces services d'alerte précoce de l'Union africaine soient renforcés pour qu'un échange effectif et en temps réel soit fait. Et elle voudrait aussi proposer que le groupe de sages pourrait être actif pour qu'il agisse en cas de non-respect des accords conclus entre les États et comme ça pour avoir une paix durable dans les États membres. Je vous remercie.
Murakoze. J'ai les Philippines. Mrs. Renis Korokota, Assistant Deputy General, Special Concerns Office, Security Council.
First of all, I extend our sincere gratitude to the United Nations system, the African Union, and government of Kenya for hosting this gathering. And we learned a lot from this two-day conference. And we will be taking home some of the lessons learned here in this conference, especially in the special meeting we have on aftercare and reintegration program this morning. As I shared in this session this morning, we are developing a program for reintegration and de-radicalization. And we are still trying to find out a model that we can maybe imitate or learn something. And we found out that Kenya can offer us some valuable knowledge on the way we can do our reintegration and de-radicalization program. I just want to say thank you to the organizers, and on the part of the Philippines, we hope that we work with you in this endeavor as we are also struggling really seriously with our problem of terrorism, and which is aggravated now by the presence of foreign terrorist fighters. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the insights into the challenges. Now we have Russian Federation, Mr. Dmitry Makarov. Maxim Chef, Ambassador, Permanent Representative to the International Organization in Nairobi.
Благодарю вас, госпожа председатель, уважаемая госпожа председатель и сопредседатель, уважаемый посол Кимани, уважаемые панелисты. Мы признательны правительству Кении и Управлению по контртерроризму ООН за созыв этой конференции в целях укрепления безопасности и стабильности в Африке и создания широкой контртеррористической коалиции. В ситуации распространения террористической угрозы все члены международного сообщества должны сосредоточить свои усилия на осуществлении глобальной контртеррористической стратегии ООН, всеобъемлющих рамок ООН по борьбе с террористической пропагандой, а также кодекса поведения для достижения мира, свободного от терроризма, который был принят на полях 73-й сессии Генеральной Ассамблеи ООН. Мы приветствуем недавно принятые группой G20 заявление по борьбе с терроризмом в интернете. Россия обладает уникальным опытом противодействия и радикализации, состоящим в эффективном вовлечении традиционных конфессий, учебных, научных и деловых кругов гражданского общества в целом в эту работу. Мы приветствуем возрастающее внимание международного сообщества к превентивным мерам, аспектам борьбы с терроризмом, в частности, противодействия экстремизму в его насильственных проявлениях. При этом у нас сохраняется озабоченность тем, что концепция предотвращения насильственного экстремизма может использоваться для размывания определения терроризма, применения двойных стандартов, политизации проблемы, а также как инструмент геополитики, вмешательства во внутренние дела и смены режимов. Против этого мы хотели бы предостеречь. Мы озабочены продолжающейся активизацией террористических организаций в Африке, в том числе связанных с ИГИЛ и Аль-Каидой, которые, потерпев военное поражение в Сирии, возвращаются в страны происхождения или направляются в третьи страны. Мы поддерживаем контртеррористические усилия африканских стран. В особенности мы отмечаем роль Кении, чей вклад в эту борьбу, как в рамках АМИСОМ, так и самостоятельно, имеет существенное значение. Будем продолжать обучать кенийских правоприменителей для укрепления их потенциала в борьбе с преступностью и терроризмом. Изучаем возможности иных форм сотрудничества. Мы считаем полезным и перспективным наращивание взаимодействия в контртеррористической области между Комиссией Африканского Союза и Шанхайской организацией сотрудничества. Первый шаг в этом направлении был сделан в декабре 2018 года в Алжире, где был подписан меморандум о взаимопонимании между региональной антитеррористической структурой Шанхайской организации сотрудничества и Африканским центром изучения и исследований по терроризму. Шанхайская организация сотрудничества разработана конвенция по противодействию экстремизму. Она подписана в 2017 году и открыта для присоединения. Конвенция содержит первое всеобъемлющее и полное определение экстремизма и представляет собой хорошую основу для взаимодействия с партнерами из разных стран. Сотрудничество в ее рамках будет, безусловно, полезно, в том числе для Африки. Благодарю вас.
Thank you very much. Now we have a UN Women Policy Specialist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the beginning, I would like to join former speakers in thanking the government of Kenya and the people of Kenya in having us here in their beautiful city, and for the UN Office of Counterterrorism. UN Women highly appreciate our partnership. And it is a pleasure to be today in this congregation. Madam Chair, UN Women approach in supporting prevention of violent extremism remain grounded on the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, the UN Priority Prevention Agenda, and the development solutions outlined in Agenda 2030. As such, UN Women provides technical advice and capacity building support to stakeholders with the objective of integrating gender perspective in all measures and processes related to counterterrorism and prevention of violent extremism in line with Security Council 2242. In developing and implementing our programs, we follow the approach and principle of leaving no one behind, and we follow a whole of society and whole of government approaches. A good example of our work is the work we do in Kenya, where our partnership we continue to have with the National Counter-Terrorism Center, which has resulted in the inclusion of a standalone gender pillar within the revised national strategy to counter violent extremism. On that note, I would like to sincerely thank His Excellency Ambassador Martin Kimani, who has provided committed and exemplary leadership in advancing gender mainstreaming in the national framework. Given the regional dimension of terrorism, which demands strengthened and concerted efforts from all stakeholders to increase preparedness and recovery structures at the local level and to facilitate humanitarian action, in addition, we need to strengthen criminal justice processes, rehabilitation and reintegration processes for women, children, and men. These structures and mechanisms must be gender responsive for it to be effective. It is also a plea from UN Women to avail your available platforms at the national level and at the regional level to bring and amplify the voices of targeted communities to bring out solutions from the local level, which is very, very important. UN Women extends its offer to regional entities, including the African Union, Economic Commission of West African States, Group of 5 Sahel, and the Lake Chad Basin Commission in Chad. For example, UN Women supports the G5 Sahel to strengthen gender mainstreaming throughout its work, as well as support provided with the creation of the platform of women from the Sahel region. This support strengthens the interface between women-led civil society and the G5 Sahel. It is very important to provide political leadership and accompaniment to ensure that women are effectively on the table where security sector processes are discussed and implemented. On the way forward, UN Women will continue to leverage its partnerships and platforms, as well as its advocacy and accountability mandates in support of national and regional stakeholders to meet women, peace and security commitments as outlined in Security Council Resolution 1325 and its sister resolutions. This is an integral part of our efforts to counter terrorism and the prevention of violent extremism. On that note, I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Now I have Carefronting Nigeria.
Thank you for the opportunity. Your Excellencies here present, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Margie Peters. I work for Carefronting, a civil society organization working in northern Nigeria, predominantly in the northeast, piloting the work of PTVE, preventing and transforming violent extremism. So what I'm going to talk about has come from my background and experience in working predominantly with victim survivors of Boko Haram insurgency, and until recently with the support of the Global Center. Experiences coming from sharings from the coastal counties of Kenya, where we've been working for over a year. And looking at all the works in trying to engage VEGs, FIFs, and all other CT approaches, we're proposing that what we need to look at and what we need to develop is the concept of inclusive security. And when we talk about inclusive security, it shows that there is more webs that we need to bring together in ensuring that this gives us the result that we want. The prevailing situation worldwide has redefined the dynamics of our relationship. Social and cultural networking, never before have the fates of individuals, communities, and nations been so intertwined. And never before had our safety and well-being depended so much on the safety and well-being of others. Today's problems from violent extremism, terrorism, and weapons proliferation cannot be solved by any one structure, agency, or individual. To address these problems, we need to abandon familiar approaches that are today prevalent and invest in tools needed to build consciousness and security to mitigate the challenges of today's world. These tools include use of communal values, trust and relationship building, preventive diplomacy, mediation, transitional justice and reconciliation, restorative justice, trauma healing, community building and sustainable economies, community cohesion, resilience, and, like we said, shared platform for inclusive security. Inclusive security is mobilizing the societal structure towards promoting safety and security. These structures will be aligned into creating a pathway for radicalization monitoring and early warning reporting, integrating mainline security operatives to work with civilian community and security frameworks. And if we look at the areas that inclusive security really hammers on, that brings about togetherness is one, we have to look at building and sustaining the concept of community resilience. And we have seen that happen with from Buktol work in Sierra Leone, the Gachacha that happened, and a lot of work that happened in the western side of Kenya after the 2008 election violence. Most of the concepts that were used in building community resilience have helped in ensuring that people come together, especially when they have experienced mass atrocity. Then we have to engage the concept of shared security so that it is a bottom-up approach, and everybody realize that we are all responsible for safety and security in domains where we reside. And that gives us a chance for radicalization monitoring, which is what we need to integrate in our community system so that we know when activities or issues that are alien to our communities are coming in. And radicalization monitoring creates a place for radicalization tracking, and we have to be able to create affinity space so that tensions that come from within, without, from cultures, from activities, from works, from pressures that come in struggle for space will give us a platform for engaging. And like one of the panelists talked about earlier on, we have to actually mark up a system for early warning monitoring and early warning tracking. And most importantly, we must have a concept that works within the preface of community values and having a feedback mechanism within the structure of security so that we'll be able to share and learn. So what we're saying in essence is that for us to look at approaches and diverse that keeps everybody on its toes and ensuring that we're all involved and responsible for safety in our community, we must adopt the principle of inclusive security. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Maintenant, j'ai l'Organisation internationale de la francophonie.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je vais être très bref comme l'ambassadeur Martin Kimani nous a demandé d'être très pratique. En face de nous, nous avons un slogan de l'Office contre le terrorisme des Nations Unies qui nous dit que un futur sans terrorisme, un futur. Et dans ce slogan que nous devrons lire et relire, il y a un mot important, le futur. Nous pouvons agir sur le futur, mais nous ne pouvons pas agir sur le passé. Et évidemment, nous pouvons partager donc les bonnes pratiques de tous les pays. Et je voudrais encore remercier les Nations Unies et l'Union africaine et le gouvernement du Kenya pour cette réunion qui nous a permis déjà d'être ensemble dans cette salle avec beaucoup d'acteurs, et en particulier des acteurs qui sont au front sur la lutte contre le terrorisme. Parce qu'évidemment, il y a des problèmes en Afrique notamment qui existent avant le terrorisme et sur lesquels nous travaillons. Mais la question du terrorisme doit faire l'objet d'un focus particulier. Nous avons ici des chefs de renseignement, des chefs d'intelligence, et ça, c'est un élément très important. Je voudrais souligner un point qui concerne l'échange des bonnes pratiques, et un point sur lequel, évidemment, la francophonie peut, de façon très modeste, apporter sa contribution avec toutes les institutions qui sont ici. C'est la question de partage d'expérience, et en particulier sur la question des données. Des données, parce que comme vous le savez, évidemment, la plupart des gens qui travaillent dans le domaine de la technologie, de la science ou de l'intelligence artificielle, beaucoup d'algorithmes sont en anglais. Évidemment, ce n'est pas très facile. Un des plus grands sites de partage de connaissances sur ces questions-là où les gens travaillent sur l'intelligence artificielle qui s'appelle Arvix, est un site qui est en anglais, qui malheureusement les francophones qui ne sont pas anglophones ne peuvent pas accéder à ce site. Et sur ce site, évidemment, il y a beaucoup de travail qui est fait sur la question de la disruption du terrorisme dans des pays qui sont confrontés à cela, comment on peut utiliser les bases de données pour à la fois anticiper les actions terroristes, pour comprendre leur comportement et pour donc sur la question du futur. Et je pense que nous pouvons convenir avec l'agence de contre-terrorisme de l'Union africaine qui est basée à Alger. J'ai commencé à parler avec notre collègue qui est sur la table, que je remercie. Donc nous pouvons faire ce travail-là de partage d'informations de façon évidemment très particulière, parce que, et je voudrais terminer sur cela, et c'est ça aussi la question du terrorisme, c'est une question très sensible que nous ne pouvons pas aborder comme une question comme la lutte contre la pauvreté ou le développement, parce qu'il y a une question sensible. Les terroristes nous regardent, ils nous écoutent, ils suivent tout ce que nous faisons, et donc nous devrons aussi intérioriser cet élément-là qui est extrêmement important. Et je dis que nous sommes disposés au niveau de la francophonie à travailler avec vous et avec l'Office des Nations Unies, pour, notamment sur la question du Sahel, pour réunir à la fois les services, mais aussi les ingénieurs francophones, et qui peuvent être affectés au travail de la police, de l'identification, pour travailler sur cet élément-là. Et je le dis pour terminer, parce que j'ai été témoin évidemment de la montée en puissance du terrorisme dans le Sahel. Au niveau de la francophonie, j'étais envoyé, en tout cas responsable de projet pour le Mali en 2010-2011, et nous avons effectivement vu comment cela a évolué, et donc nous devrons anticiper et regarder ce qui va se passer dans le futur. Ça, c'est un élément très important, et je voudrais vraiment vous remercier.
Merci beaucoup. Et maintenant, j'ai le Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président et Madame la coprésidente, de nous avoir donné l'opportunité de prendre la parole à cette auguste assemblée. La délégation togolaise, je suis d'abord le commissaire divisionnaire de police Balaté, je suis le directeur général adjoint de la police. La délégation togolaise saisit cette opportunité pour remercier le Bureau des Nations Unies chargé de lutter contre le terrorisme et l'extrémisme violent, le Bureau de coordination des Nations Unies au Kenya et le gouvernement kenyan qui ont permis la tenue de cette conférence régionale africaine de haut niveau, lieu de partage de bonnes pratiques, de création de partenariats, de renforcement de coopération entre les États membres, les agences et les acteurs chargés de la lutte contre le terrorisme et la prévention de l'extrémisme violent pouvant conduire au terrorisme. Je voudrais saisir cette occasion pour remercier tous les panélistes qui ont su diriger les débats et exposer les expériences qu'ils ont vécues, qui sont pleines d'enseignements. La sous-région ouest-africaine est menacée par des attaques terroristes et est exposée à l'extrémisme violent, conduisant au terrorisme, source d'atteinte à la sécurité, à la paix et à la stabilité des pays. Le Togo, pour le moment, n'a pas été objet d'une attaque terroriste, mais n'est pas à l'abri de cette menace. À partir du moment où nous savons que c'est une menace qui se propage très rapidement à travers tout le monde. Le gouvernement togolais a pris des mesures de prévention et a signé des mémorandums d'entente avec le Ghana, c'est les pays voisins, le Ghana, le Burkina et le Bénin. Ces mémorandums d'entente visent à renforcer la coopération entre les services de sécurité et de renseignement de ces États pour le partage d'informations et en même temps pour la lutte contre le crime transnational organisé. À travers ces mémorandums, nous avons aussi, dans le cadre de l'initiative d'Accra, l'organisation périodique la rencontre des services, la rencontre périodique des services de sécurité pour échanger et être au même niveau d'information. Nous avons l'organisation des opérations conjointes de sécurité, qu'elles soient bilatérales ou multilatérales, ce dont a fait cas le Bénin hier. Et je peux citer en la matière que nous avons eu une opération bilatérale conjointe de sécurité avec le Burkina sous le nom de Koumouré Motao, qui veut dire entente entre les pays. Cette opération a eu lieu encore avec le Bénin sous le nom de Benodou, ça veut dire le fait de rester ensemble, et une opération conjointe multilatérale entre le Togo, le Bénin, le Burkina Faso et le Ghana. Suite aux attaques terroristes au Burkina Faso, le Togo n'est pas resté les bras croisés. Le Togo a déclenché une opération dénommée Koundouari, impliquant toutes les unités de défense et de sécurité. Et cette opération est en cours dans la région septentrionale du pays, puisque c'est cette région qui fait frontière avec le Burkina, une partie du Bénin et une partie du Ghana, que ce soit du côté nord-ouest ou nord-est de la partie septentrionale. Toujours dans le souci de prévenir ces atteintes à la tranquillité des populations, des unités spécialisées ont été créées et formées au sein des unités de police de gendarmerie, dont nous pouvons citer les cas du GILAT, du GPN et de l'USIG. Et à cet effet, pour maintenir les capacités de réaction de ces unités, des exercices de simulation sont souvent organisés. Dans le domaine de la lutte, ou bien dans le domaine de la bonne gouvernance et de la lutte contre la corruption, des mécanismes ont été mis en place. Je vais citer par là le CENTIF, qui est une unité ou une cellule chargée de détecter les flux et le blanchiment des capitaux et le financement des capitaux liés au crime organisé et au terrorisme. Il y a une haute autorité de la prévention et de lutte contre la corruption et les infractions assimilées aussi, qui est un mécanisme de lutte contre la corruption, et elle peut être saisie par un numéro vert qui est le 82 117. Dans le souci de réduire la frustration des jeunes et de leur permettre de s'autonomiser, le gouvernement togolais a pris des mesures pour les encourager à l'entrepreneuriat.
Pourrais-je demander de conclure?
En matière de lutte contre l'extrémisme violent, le gouvernement a pris en Conseil des ministres le 15 mai 2019 un décret instituant le Comité international de prévention et de lutte contre l'extrémisme violent. Le ministère de la Sécurité, en collaboration avec l'ambassade des États-Unis, a procédé lors d'une conférence organisée les 18 et 19 juin 2019 à Dapon au lancement de ce comité. Depuis le lundi 8 juillet et ce jusqu'au vendredi 12, il y a une équipe ou une mission d'évaluation conjointe des facteurs de risque dans cette zone. La délégation présente actuellement sur le terrain discutera avec les jeunes, les femmes, les associations, les leaders religieux pour identifier les problèmes liés au fléau afin d'évaluer les besoins en termes de prévention pour accompagner les populations locales et leur procurer des outils leur permettant de résister contre l'extrémisme violent. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Merci. I would like to ask all the other speakers to remain in the 3 minutes because otherwise we cannot give the floor to everyone, and we have to finish by 5:20, 30 maximum. to enable the last session of the day, which is a wrap-up session. So I'm sorry if I have to interrupt, but it's just in the interest of giving the floor to the maximum of speakers. So now we have Mauritius.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First of all, on behalf of the government of Mauritius, I would like to thank the government of Kenya and the UN Office of Counterterrorism for co-hosting such an important conference to discuss on a pertinent topic which is of real concern to us. I want to seize this opportunity to share as to how the island of Mauritius is presently dealing with this ever-looming threat. Although Mauritius has so far been spared from any terrorist act which are affecting a number of countries around the world, including the African continent, yet we fully acknowledge that we are not immune to such act. We have witnessed that the spread of radicalization and the threat to violent extremism in recent years have affected a number of countries around the world. Facing such situation, Mauritius has realized how vulnerable it is becoming with regard to this global threat, and we cannot remain complacent. The phenomenon of violent extremism, though not so pronounced in Mauritius, yet we believe the presence of its root causes may be simmering. However, Mauritius is getting ready with various measures so as to be in a state of readiness if ever we are faced to the scourges of violent extremism. The government of Mauritius is leaving no stone unturned in the preventive fight against terrorism and violent extremism. In that regard, as announced in its government program of 2015 and 19, the Counterterrorism Unit of Mauritius was revamped and given new mandates to be better equipped and expand its intelligence networking at local, regional, and international level. Chair, over generations, we have built and inherited a successful multiracial, multi-faith democracy which is very open, diverse, and welcoming. Mauritius, being a multi-ethnic and multicultural country, coexistence of diverse ethnicity, religion, and languages are the key factors that are contributing to peace and harmony in its community, which we believe need to be further consolidated. We have seen that one of the major challenges for a number of countries dealing with violent extremism is accepting the cultural differences while promoting social cohesion and inclusiveness. We are fully aware that the breakdown in social cohesion can lead to a breakdown in community resilience. This, in turn, can lead to a range of social problems, including violent extremism. Mauritius being a country which is so culturally diverse, it becomes more important to have a well-elaborated approach that bounds the communities and create multicultural tolerance. The level of success in Mauritius so far has been encouraging simply because the strategy of nipping the problem in the bud has been adopted. Here, I would like to point out that Mauritius is in process of finalizing and implementing its first national strategy to counter radicalization and violent extremism, which has been derived from the SADC regional counterterrorism strategy based on the 4 pillars of the United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy. A series of measures are being considered for the prevention and countering terrorism and violent extremism. Community engagement is one of the key elements of the Mauritian strategy, which will aim at getting the root causes and factors that contribute to terrorism and violent extremism by actively engaging and bonding with individuals, communities, as well as regional and international partners. Chair, allow me to also highlight that Mauritius, being a member of various international and regional organizations, has adopted a number of conventions and resolutions to show its strong commitment to address all forms and manifestations of terrorism domestically and abroad. I am of the opinion that this conference on counterterrorism and prevention of violent extremism conducive to terrorism and sharing of best practices is indeed a well-timed opportunity for all of us to have a thorough understanding of various complexities and challenges in preventing and countering violent extremism, which will in turn help us to better prepare and gear our efforts as to how and what needs to be done at various levels. We are aware that preventing and countering violent extremism cannot be done in isolation. This requires strong determination and concerted effort from one and all. As a small island state, we need to support and cooperate with our regional and international partners who have the necessary expertise and know-how in dealing with such threat. Once again, I wish to express my gratitude to the laudable initiative of the Kenyan government and the Secretary General of the United Nations and the United Nations Office on Counterterrorism for having facilitated such fruitful interaction on this relevant topic. And we are very much confident as delegate from Mauritius that we'll have some good takeaways back home so that we can implement in our forthcoming prevention strategy to counter violent extremism. I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have now African Union.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Hadiza Mustafa. I'm the Special Advisor of the Chairperson on Peace and Security and Governance. I would like to thank the excellent panelists for their presentation, especially Idris from CAIRD, and my brother, the Commissioner for Political Affairs and Peace and Security, especially for notifying us about the coordination meeting between the regional economic organizations. This is hoping that with that meeting, we'll have better synergy, better cooperation, so that we can harmonize our actions and use the scarce resources we have. Now, in terms of partnership and building new relationship, I think the chairperson, the special envoy of Kenya, said we should be very practical. But before I make my 3 observations in terms of how the relationship between the United Nations and the African continent in the fight against counterterrorism, I want to just add to the issue of APSA. And this is because I think one of the panelists talked about stronger management from the African Union. I want to say that the African Union is conducting a reform, and the reform has 3 basic legs to address some of the identified problems. And one of the big issue of the reform, or one of the things we want to address, is the issue of administrative reform, to make the African Union Commission itself fit for purpose so that we can deliver on all of these things. So that is really being addressed. The second and big problem, or perhaps it's actually the first problem, is the issue of overdependence on foreign funding. And so the reform is geared towards addressing how we can be self-financing. So that's another one. And then the most important thing is how to review our partnership. So I thought that I should put that as part of a comprehensive brief that you have received on APSA and on our efforts in the African Union. Now, to my 3 comments. In terms of building relationship, and since this meeting is to inform a bigger meeting in 2020, according to the Secretary General's brief at the opening ceremony. I think one of the key, very important issue, and I think the Travel Fusion Center mentioned it, is about intelligence sharing. I'll tell you a simple story of a young girl who said, and this is in relation to fighting Boko Haram in Lake Chad Basin. And she said, but we have the presence of all these technologically advanced countries who have drones and have all of that. And how is it that we are not able to share intelligence and to share life distance? Because terrorism is an intelligence war. And so I think that I want to put this in the basket of considerations. We should find better ways of sharing intelligence. At least now, developed countries are in 2 theaters of war against terrorism that I know of. The one I know best, of course, is the one in the Lake Chad, because I was honored to be the ambassador of Nigeria in Cameroon at the height of the Boko Haram destin. And I know the kind of communication, the kind of technology, the kind of sophisticated planes that are present in those theaters. And if we still have some of the issues that we have, I think that we should definitely look at that and look at how we can best exchange intelligence so that MNJTF, for instance, can fight better. So I thought I should put that in the distance. Not only intelligence, even analysis, timely, so that we are all on the same page. Who is the enemy? Where is the enemy? And what should we do about it militarily? Of course, the issue of human rights is important, but the issue of also conducting the war is also important. For the countries of Lake Chad, the fighting is ongoing, and the fighting successfully is very important. So I thought that I should, The second worrisome, well, not worrisome, the second thing that we can try to address in our relationship is the issue of the humanitarian agencies that are present in these theaters. And here I want to give the example of Libya, for instance, where there are multiplicities of agencies. So I think that we should have a conversation about regulating these agencies so that their work is coordinated, so that they don't become a problem by themselves. I think that that is another issue that we have always talked about, and I think that it was not very well mentioned. For instance, in Maiduguri, you will be very shocked to know that the presence of the humanitarian agencies have actually created its own problems. Issue of rent, for instance, because of the insertion of a lot of these people with a lot of dollars in the society, in the community, has created its own problems. So we really need to have a conversation on things like that going forward and in building partnership. And then, of course, the last thing I want to talk about, this now involves us as African continent. This is to talk about regional cooperation, and I really thank the Special Envoy again for mentioning something very important, and that is to alert people who have not already experienced, countries that have not already experienced terrorism. And I was so happy to hear my brother from Togo talking about this. We do not really address that a lot. And sometimes at the beginning of Boko Haram, for instance, I know the kind of challenges we had, even with our neighbors. So the issue of solidarity with people that already have this going on in their countries is very, very important. And the issue also of those who do not already have and what they need to do, the kind of cooperation and the kind of things they need to do, because, terrorism, people move from one place to the other. Terrorists move. We've just heard about how returnees, either to their countries or people who actually have these skills, and they travel from one theater to the other to sell the only skills they have, mercenaries. So we really need to also have a conversation around people who already do not have these problems happening and what they need to do. This is very important. And I think also solidarity with people who already have, this is solidarity even within the continent itself, where people need to cooperate, need to exchange more, and then also need to really provide. Botswana here asked for, I think, which is very healthy. We should do that kind of thing, and I think we should show solidarity with each other. So I thought I should bring those three issues that I think sitting down here I have not heard. The issue of sharing intelligence from the bigger countries to the smaller countries. I know there are issues. I know people don't naturally share intelligence like that, but I think we need to address this. If this is a global problem, then people who have what they have should be able to give it regardless of conditionalities so that we can actually fight this common enemy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 3 speakers remaining, and I understand that we have to close the conversation, unfortunately, about 5:15 now. Right? Yes. Okay. So I beg the indulgence of the 3 speakers. So SRSG UNOWAS, Dr. Chambas.
I
actually will yield the floor to allow us to keep to time, since I had the opportunity yesterday to emphasize that within the West Africa Sahel area, there's a lot of effort, both nationally, but importantly, collaboratively. Countries working with each other. Many of those issues have been raised already in the context of either the MNJTF or the efforts of G5 Sahel. A more recent effort has been that which is called the Accra Initiative, where the neighbors of Burkina Faso are also seeing how they can hang heads together and share more information, intelligence, etc., try to support the effort, and all this in the context of the ECOWAS, the G5, Sahel, MNT, LCBC collaboration. So I think there's enough going on in there, enough synergy and enough energy that needs to be coordinated and supported by the international community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chambers, and now we have Turkey.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to add my voice to the delegates who congratulate the organizers of this timely and important conference and express my sincere gratitude to our host, the government of the Republic of Kenya. Turkey has been on the forefront of efforts to increase awareness of the international community on the threat of terrorism. We have worked hard bilaterally and at the various international platforms to create mechanisms for more effective counter-terrorism measures. Turkey has been playing an active role in the development of a universal legal framework under the UN system. We strongly support the global strategy and implement UN Security Council resolutions in a determined manner. Turkey has also initiated, together with the US, the Global Counter-Terrorism Forum, GCTF, and has co-chaired this body between September 2011 and April 2016. Turkey also co-chaired the Horn of Africa Working Group within the GCTF together with the European Union. Turkey is an active member of the Anti-Daesh Coalition and is co-leading the FTF Working Group within this coalition. Turkey has also successfully concluded Operation Euphrates Shield that significantly reduced Daesh influence in Iraq and Syria. Moreover, Turkey is also an active contributor to counter-terrorism capacity building programs of several states around the world. The Counter-Terrorism Department, established in 1986 within the General Directorate of Turkish National Police, contributes significantly to enhancing international cooperation in the field of counter-terrorism by organizing trainings with various countries. International training courses covers topics such as basic counter-terrorism training, radicalization leading to terrorism and its preventive measures, public awareness and prevention activities regarding violent extremism, combating terrorist organizations that abuse religion, crisis management in terrorist attacks, and strategies for its prevention and investigation processes that cover countering the financing of terrorism. Turkey has all along been underlining that terrorism poses a major threat to international peace and security. All acts of terrorism are unjustified regardless of their motivation, wherever, whenever, and by whoever committed. There should be increased cooperation between states on the basis of the extradite or prosecute principle, in order to deny any safe haven to terrorists. International community should not discriminate between terrorist organizations and must act with equal determination in preventing, suppressing, pursuing, and prosecuting all terrorist groups, their members, and activities. Any attempt to affiliate terrorism with any religion or ethnic group is utterly wrong and will, in fact, play into the hands of terrorists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, our last speaker is le Mali.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la coprésidente. Permettez-moi tout d'abord de remercier les panélistes pour leur brillante présentation ce qui nous a permis de baliser le terrain sur la thématique que nous abordons actuellement. Madame la coprésidente, nous pensons que la prévention doit reposer sur un élément important, qui est le système d'alerte précoce. Malheureusement, nous voyons qu'il n'y a pas une grande importance qui est accordée à cela, notamment dans le domaine du financement. Nous avons vu tout récemment, nous-mêmes, au niveau du comité des représentants permanents, quand nous examinons le budget de l'Union africaine, nous avons vu que la gestion des crises, il y a une grande allocation budgétaire. Mais en ce qui concerne la diplomatie préventive, vraiment, c'était le parent pauvre du budget. Nous pensons que nous devons changer cela. Une crise coûte plus cher que la prévention elle-même. Nous pensons que l'alerte précoce ne doit pas se limiter à la collecte des renseignements uniquement. Il faut aller à la prospective et à la recherche, faire même recours au monde académique, à nos sociologues, à nos historiens. Nous pensons que ça, ce sont des éléments très importants auxquels nous devons donner des réponses appropriées. Parce que quand on parle de partenariat, nous pensons que ces partenariats, ça doit aller au-delà même régional. Nous avons le niveau national avec la société civile, mais ça doit être un partenariat global. Ce partenariat global peut nous aider à prévenir beaucoup de choses. Madame la coprésidente, le second aspect que je voudrais aborder, ce sont les mécanismes ad hoc, comme le G5 Sahel, le MJTF, AMISOM dont vous avez parlé. Nous pensons que ce sont des mécanismes très importants et qui méritent d'être soutenus. Ce sont des mécanismes, nous sommes sûrs, qui seront appelés à être des piliers concrets et opérationnels de l'APSA. Le troisième point, Madame la coprésidente, que nous voudrions évoquer, c'est-à-dire il faut qu'on mette l'accent aussi sur notre socle culturel. L'Afrique est très riche de sa culture, de ses valeurs culturelles. Nous pensons que cette culture que nous avons dans nos pays, sur ces continents, peut nous aider aussi dans le cadre de l'établissement, bien sûr, des partenariats, mais dans le cadre de la prévention également. Pour terminer, Madame la Présidente, nous voudrons signaler ici que nous abordons un thème qui est très important, le terrorisme, dont mon pays est victime depuis un certain nombre d'années. Donc je ne peux pas terminer mon intervention sans avoir une pensée pieuse pour toutes les victimes du terrorisme à travers le monde. Je vous remercie.
Merci infiniment. Nous avons épuisé la liste des speakers pour cette session, où la particularité était de voir la manière d'utiliser comme levier l'architecture de paix et de sécurité de l'Union africaine. Et aussi, nous avons vu à travers ce que les panélistes nous ont donné et partagé comme information, mais aussi comme recommandation, qu'il y a beaucoup à faire dans la coordination, la complémentarité, mais aussi les synergies entre les différentes structures, et en particulier en ce qui concerne le partage de l'information, et de l'information pas seulement vue sous l'aspect des données, mais également sous la forme de l'intelligence, et qui doit poursuivre plus loin en allant dans les aspects de prospective afin de pouvoir anticiper les stratégies aussi des terroristes, puisque si on est seulement en réaction, on ne pourra pas être en avance si on ne peut pas avoir de la prospective. Donc avec ça, il y a beaucoup d'éléments qui ont été partagés. Je n'ai pas l'intention de les résumer tous, mais seulement de prendre la parole par rapport à un des speakers qui nous a dit « There is so much that has been shared during the conference day 1 and day 2, and the fact that almost each and everyone can go back with a number of takeaways, and some in the context of creating their own national strategy against fighting terrorism and preventing violent extremism, and some already asking more about best practices to be shared, and also coaching and mentoring. When we look at again, the complexity of what we are dealing with, I think clearly the aspect of working collaboratively and in cooperation is the one which is going to be a winner, And it's not just at national level, but also at regional and sub-regional level. And some of you have highlighted that it has to be at global level in terms of solidarity if we want to win the battle. So I'm going to hand over to my co-chair for other concluding remarks, because I think we have to, again, leave the space, not fighting to keep it. Because this is what the terrorists do. They fight to keep the space. So thank you very much. And I hand over.
Very quickly in conclusion, to thank our panelists again and everyone who spoke, just some very quick points that I'll just strike off. From the AU, there is an issue of compliance and implementation of the decisions of the heads of state on counterterrorism and the instruments of the AU. But in terms of the prevention agenda, there may be other instruments available and other agreements available that could have an impact on how countries align their prevention agenda. Then there was an issue that emerged of benchmarking with each other and then systematic capacity building from there. And this is where institutions such as the United Nations and other partners can come in to help those sorts of systematic capacity building of counterterrorism and prevention institutions in Africa. There was an offer on the Travel Fusion Center that is there to be taken up and considered, and it seemed that not only is it to come and look, but there is help in implementing it and utilizing it together. There was the idea that was put forward of regional financial intelligence units that leverage on the CT, UN's counterterrorism strategy, and the other instruments to counter terrorism financing. We heard from countries that specifically needed help on disengagement, reintegration, others on building out intelligence and CT fusion centers domestically. And it strikes me that the AU and the UN have a lot they can do to assist those kinds of conversations to happen more practically. And finally, there was an important point on the activity of humanitarian actors operating in terrorism theaters, where especially there are military confrontations going on. That point, I think, requires deeper thought and a conversation that we do need to have at some point. Other than that, I heard a lot of other ideas that I did not note down, or I don't want to keep reading the list. But this is a session that brought everything we've done over the last 2 days together in trying to see how we can structurally start to deal with counterterrorism in a renewed and more powerful sense. Thank you for your contributions, and to my co-chair, thank you very much.
Dear colleagues, if you could just please remain seated, because His Excellency, we're now moving straight into the concluding session. His Excellency, the Cabinet Secretary Minister of Interior of the Government of the Republic of Kenya and Under Secretary General Voronkov will co-chair this concluding session, where the final chair's summary concluding the deliberations and delivering the main conclusions of this conference will be read out. So if you could kindly please stay in the room, as His Excellency the Minister and Under Secretary General Voronkov are walking here and will be here shortly. Thank you very much for your patience.
So, good afternoon. I call to order the closing session of the African Regional High-Level Conference on Counter-Terrorism and the Prevention of Violent Extremism conducive to terrorism. Your Excellency, Mr. Fred Matiangi, Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Interior, Coordination of National Security of National Government of Kenya, I would like to warmly thank you for joining us to conclude these 2 days of productive deliberations under the guidance of His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Across 4 thematic sessions, we have benefited not only from the remarks of distinguished co-chairs and panelists, but also contributions from more than 120 speakers from member states, international and regional organizations, United Nations entities, and civil society. Our collective reflection also benefited from the various side events that were held on the margins of the conference, delving into specific topics and experiences. And I take this opportunity to thank their organizers. Based on these comprehensive and rich discussions, this session is intended to chart the way ahead to mobilize the efforts of the United Nations and the international community in support of the efforts of African member states to prevent and counter terrorism. I would like to invite His Excellency Mr. Fred Matiangi to deliver his concluding remarks. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. Vladimir Voronkov, Under Secretary General for Counterterrorism at the United Nations, distinguished heads of delegations, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is a privilege in my role overseeing Kenya's security efforts to join this conference of committed stakeholders in preventing and countering terrorism. Kenya, like many of the countries represented here, is on the front lines of a struggle against global terrorist groups and their regional affiliates. I have learned that the discussions here since yesterday have revealed lessons and techniques that we should adopt at scale and deliver in a practical way. This era of modern jihadist terrorism has lasted for decades, and it has further to go. Even as we mainstream our response to it and seek to bring different tools in government and civil society to fight it, we should not normalize it. By that I mean seeking to behave as if we can live side by side with the destructive and dangerous ideologies that motivate and justify the actions of groups allied with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Africa has been the victim of similar ideas in the past that at core are anti-African in their contempt for our desire for democracy, development, and stability, and in their attempt to attack our cultural and religious heritage. It is my hope that those of you who are committed to combating ideologies that support or justify terrorism will rally alternative narratives rooted in the richness of our diverse African heritage and that stand in opposition to hateful and divisive ideas. These, allied with collaborative efforts within civil society and alongside government delivery of development and public services, will shrink their ability to radicalize and recruit our citizens. Prevention has been a big part of your discussions. I urge you all to monitor and report success. This will be the key to you making effective arguments on why there should be more investment in your work. We all know how expensive traditional counterterrorism is. It is a necessary expense, however, but more of its resources would be directed to prevention if the case was clearly made using evidence of effectiveness. In regard to military and law enforcement efforts against terrorist groups in Africa, the single most important aim that I hope we all share is to prevent these groups from holding any ground in Africa. Our goal should go beyond degrading them. We should now move to destroying their military capabilities. This is the basis of attacking their funding and their pretensions to legitimacy. By succeeding in this goal, all the other tools you have been discussing will have a chance for success. Achieving military victory over these groups, however, needs us to learn from each other's experiences, particularly to learn from the successes and shortcomings of the multinational missions that are today operating in Somalia, in the Sahel, and in West Africa. Our missions must have the right mandates and rules of engagement, deploy the right force multipliers and enablers, be connected to comprehensive counter-terrorism financing regimes, and run alongside a strong political and stabilization framework. It is here that the global community must step up to assist most African states on the front lines, reflecting our collective decisions to stand together against these groups. I hope that the countries represented here will carry home the need for us to build strong regional frameworks for action on countering terrorism financing, money laundering, and drug and human trafficking. These efforts must cross borders to take on terrorist groups that in all but a few cases are transnational. We cannot have strong regimes neighboring weaker ones if we are going to achieve victory. I therefore urge the African Union and its regional economic communities to do even more to design, capacitate, and advocate for such frameworks. When it comes to law enforcement and intelligence, better coordination and learning from each other's experiences is critical for success. Too many of our counterterrorism operators throughout the world are still working within silos. Here in Kenya, we have dedicated a lot of effort to multi-agency coordination. We undertake joint planning and operations from the analytical stage to the deploying of operations to disrupt and destroy terrorist networks and cells. We have a lot to share with one another in Africa and with all the other countries represented here. I assure that Kenya is ready to share what we know and our skills, experiences, and are also listening keenly to you so that we continue to strengthen ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, even as we undertake counter-terrorism work in our countries and regions, we have to ensure that our political environments are stable and positive. Our enemies have taken advantage of political instability in many parts of Africa to thrive and gain ground in Africa. Here in Kenya, we are committed to growing a stable democracy whose citizens feel included in the national conversation and governance. We have used a pragmatic and inclusive approach as exemplified by His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, who has built a strong bipartisan, consensus-driven framework on all critical issues of development and security. Stable politics also needs to be tied to effective government that delivers the right public goods to citizens. Kenya has undertaken to address this governance question through constitutionally devolving power and because of a strong national desire for development. We have to deliver as government to close the gaps that terrorists exploit to radicalize and recruit. A major deliverable is to do more to minimize corruption and impunity by those in positions of responsibility in government, in the private sector, and in civil society. The abuse of power to illegally grab public resources is one of the greatest enablers of terrorism. Corruption is everywhere in the world, but Africa must make special efforts to fight these fights if we are to have a secure continent. Here in Kenya, we have openly taken on this fight, and we believe that we will be able to demonstrate to the citizens of our beloved country and to the world that no one is above the law. A strong and effective state is a prerequisite to successfully combat terrorist groups. The spread of these groups across multiple borders demonstrates that even those countries not presently under attack should be getting ready. I hope that you will all carry home the message of why it is so important to undertake relevant and difficult reforms in order to build the kind of states that can successfully take on terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot of work to get done. Great proposals have emerged in your discussions. We must now translate them into action. I hope that the United Nations and the African Union will make an effort to translate some of your findings into an action plan that can receive investment and be implemented by all of us as a prerequisite. Finally, as we come to the end of this conference, I want to very sincerely, on my own behalf and on behalf of the government of the Republic of Kenya, thank the United Nations Office on Counter-Terrorism, the African Union, the National Counter-Terrorism Center, and all other stakeholders for the immense efforts that you have made to bring us together here. Kenya will remain a champion of counter-terrorism and security in Africa and the world, and we are ready to collaborate with all of you to achieve this goal. I wish all of you a safe journey home, and thank you so much for your valuable contributions for the last 2 days. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Matiangi for his statement. Allow me now to deliver my concluding remarks. Your Excellency, Dr. Fred Matiangi, Cabinet Secretary of the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Security of National Government of Republic of Kenya, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank His Excellency President Kenyatta and the Government of the Republic of Kenya, the United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, His Excellency Moussa Faki, Chairperson of African Union Commission, the United Nations Office at Nairobi, and all those who have made his landmark conference possible through their leadership, participation, and contribution. I am happy to acknowledge participation of 1,497 delegates from member states. Again, 1,497 delegates from member states, international and regional organizations, the United Nations entity, and 55 civil society organizations, including women organizations and youth groups, in the conference and its 13 side events. I think it's a success. So many people came to exchange experiences, and I'm happy to see the hall full of you, and you're engaged in this discussion. Thank you again very much for your presence. I would also like to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the State of Qatar, and the United Kingdom for their financial contributions and pledges for this conference. This conference has highlighted the impressive work that you are doing to tackle terrorism and violent extremism across the vast and diverse continent. It has demonstrated the importance of African-led and African-owned counter-terrorism efforts that are strengthened by the solidarity and collective responsibility of the international community. This is the best combination of interests: African-led, African-owned, and solidarity and collective responsibility of the international community. And it has generated lots of innovative ideas and practical actions to be implemented at global, regional, national, and local levels. It also highlighted what needs to be done to prevent and counter terrorism in Africa. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres emphasized that for terrorism to be defeated, it's essential that African counterterrorism is holistic, well-funded, underpinned by respect for human rights, and most importantly, backed by political will. These outcomes built on the last year's United Nations High-Level Conference on Counterterrorism in New York. This regional conference is therefore a key part of a broader initiative to give new momentum to multilateral cooperation to address the evolving threat of terrorism and violent extremism. To share the key points from our discussions over the last 2 days, the United Nations will work with the government of the Republic of Kenya to organize a side event during the next high-level conference on counterterrorism in New York in June 2020. And we are waiting for your presence at this conference, for your active participation in this conference. We would encourage that all member states benefit from what we learned here in Nairobi. This regional conference will also inform the debates at the African Union and lead to a strengthening of the African peace and security architecture's response to terrorism. There will be not a negotiated outcome from this conference, but I want to set out some key conclusions and the vision for the way forward on behalf of 2 co-chairs. First, member states have the primary responsibility for tackling terrorism and protecting their citizens. That's why this conference has focused on learning from African counterterrorism experiences, challenges, and solutions. Yesterday, during the opening session of the conference, President Kenyatta outlined Kenya's comprehensive efforts to devolve prevention work to the local level, utilize education to tackle the threat of radicalization, and to strengthen its disengagement, rehabilitation, and reintegration programs to address the threat of returning foreign terrorist fighters. We have heard many other excellent examples on nationally owned African counter-terrorism efforts, which address the specific needs of each region and country. Mr. Musa Faki Mahamat, chairperson of the African Union Commission, rightly noted the responses of Africa to violent extremism and terrorism are multiple, multifaceted, and multidimensional. To address multiple dimensions of African counter-terrorism efforts, member states, the United Nations entities, and civil society partners organized 13 side events around the conference. These side events were an important complement to the work of the conference and reflected and amplified core themes of the conference. A key message of this event is the urgent need to build a genuine partnership with African youth, to engage young men and women in leadership roles to counter and prevent extremism, violence, and conflict across the continent. The discussion also highlighted numerous bottom-up, youth-led good practices that are contributing to the silencing the guns initiative. From organizing sport events, conducting civil education to innovative art projects. The side event also focused on links between transnational organized crime and terrorism, disengagement and reintegration, on how to counter Daesh propaganda, cross-border approaches to violent extremism, correlation between climate change and violent extremism, and above all, gender dimension of countering terrorism and the role of women and girls in and under Al-Shabaab. Second, based on our discussions this morning, we must do more to listen to youth perspectives and engage young people to help shape African counterterrorism policies and programs. It was a privilege to listen to the youth envoy of the African Union yesterday. Of course, we are not ready to leave immediately our positions, but she is preparing a good ground. So I appreciate it. It was a privilege to listen to this lady. We need the dynamism, creativities, and desire for change of young Africans if we are to effectively counter the manipulative messages of terrorists. We need to make a strategic investment in their futures through quality education and employment opportunities to build resilience to violent extremism narratives that promote hatred and division. The United Nations Office of Counterterrorism stands ready to respond to this call. Third, there is a need to share critical information, good practices, and lessons learned in a more proactive way between African countries to build trust, knowledge, and institutional capacities. This includes sharing terrorist threat assessment and intelligence knowledge on a need-to-know basis. Our discussions have shown that while terrorist groups can start out in one country, they often cross national boundaries and become regional threats. All 4 sessions of the conference have demonstrated that we are often dealing with similar issues and challenges in different contexts. We must learn from each other about what works and what doesn't, and from success stories in and beyond Africa. This will help build the bold new partnerships between African countries to tackle the scourge of terrorism that the United Nations Secretary General mentioned yesterday morning. All of us in this room have a role to play to help develop and cement this new partnership. For example, my office is creating a United Nations Counterterrorism Coordination Portal under the United Nations Global Counterterrorism Coordination Compact to improve the sharing of information, resources, and expertise between member states and the United Nations. As a part of this initiative, we will produce a comprehensive list of African focal points working on counterterrorism and violent extremism issues to help promote cooperation between countries. Fourth, we need to further strengthen African regional and sub-regional counterterrorism cooperation based on the structures, objectives, principles, and values of the African peace and security architecture. African regional bodies such as the African Center for Study and Research on Terrorism, the Committee of Intelligence and Security Services in Africa, and the newly operationalized African Union Mechanism for Police Cooperation are vital frameworks to promote regional counter-terrorist cooperation. Sub-regional mechanisms such as G5 Sahel Joint Force, the African Union Mission in Somalia, the Accra Initiative, and the Multinational Joint Task Force in Lake Chad Basin are also crucial in this regard. I hope these regional and sub-regional organizations can further support African national counter-terrorism efforts by encouraging more joint cross-border projects, joint training programs, peer learning initiatives, and the sharing of resources, research, and expertise between countries. This cross-border cooperation will help tackle terrorist financing networks in Africa, that are often transnational in nature. Fifth, we need to mobilize the entire international community to support and invest in our partnership with African countries. To help facilitate this in the context of the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2322/2016, the United Nations, led by UNODC, will consider technical assistance to support national and regional platforms to strengthen international cooperation among investigators, prosecutors, and judges to prevent, investigate, and prosecute terrorist acts. Six, we need to devote even greater attention and resources to addressing the causes as well as the symptoms of terrorism and violent extremism in Africa. As His Excellency President Kenyatta observed, principled counter-terrorism operations with clear mandates, appropriate training, and predictable funding are indispensable if we are to prevent terrorist groups holding territory in Africa. But terrorism can't be defeated only by military means. As we heard in the session 2, coordinated, sustained, and inclusive preventive steps are crucial to address the drivers that push and pull individuals to become radicalized and join terrorist groups, such as protracted conflicts, inequalities, youth unemployment, poverty, inter-ethnic violence, and local clashes between farmers and herders. We have also heard innovative ways in which African countries are integrating efforts to tackle terrorism and violent extremism with their wider work to deliver Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals. We need to focus on enhancing national and community resilience, including by endorsing good governments, tackling corruption, and fully respecting human rights and the rule of law. Seventh, whole of society and whole of government approaches are the most effective way to prevent and counter terrorism and violent extremism. I welcome the active engagement of civil society in the work of the conference, and I'm happy to acknowledge that 55 civil society organizations participated in the conference. This point was made by a number of speakers in each of the sessions. In particular, many of you noted that cooperation with civil society and non-governmental organizations at the grassroots level is vital. We can't succeed without contribution of civil society. I want to pay tribute to the valuable work that civil society organizations do in Africa, often in a difficult and dangerous circumstances. This conference has also underlined the critical role of women throughout Africa in preventing and countering terrorism and violent extremism. Women's peace and security networks such as G5 Sahel Women's Platform and Kenya's Sisters Without Borders are doing extraordinary helpful work. We must tap into their expertise and experiences and ensure a gender-inclusive approach in everything we do, in line with various instruments of the United Nations, African Union, and its sub-regional bodies. Eighth, as the United Nations Secretary General Guterres mentioned yesterday morning, we need to increase our support to African victims and survivors of terrorism. I look forward to discussing practical ways to uphold the right of victims and provide them with support and justice at the first Global Congress of Victims of Terrorism in New York in June next year. Ninth, we need to promote positive narratives based on peace, respect, tolerance, and human rights as persuasive alternatives to the dangerous propaganda spread by terrorist and violent extremist groups in Africa. Our discussion has shown that Africa has powerful tools in its diverse culture, rich heritage, and long history of fighting for African freedom and independence that can be used with great effect in this regard. Lastly, I'm more convinced than ever before that the United Nations has a key role to play to support African member states to tackle terrorism and violent extremism. We must use the framework of the United Nations Global Counter-Terrorism Coordination Compact to provide you with coordinated assistance to support your implementation of the United Nations Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy and relevant Security Council and General Assembly resolutions. This capacity building assistance must also address critical gaps identified by United Nations Counter-Terrorism Committee Executive Directorate in their assessments. The United Nations Counter-Terrorism Travel Program mentioned in the previous session is an excellent example how the United Nations delivers a real impact. It supports countries in building their own capacity to detect terrorists and serious crime and establish strong regional cooperation via informal working groups. The United Nations will continue to prioritize capacity building support for African member states on key counterterrorism issues, including promoting South-South cooperation, respecting human rights, countering the financing of terrorism, and offering new opportunities to neglected communities. We will also continue to support African countries and regional organizations to develop and implement national and regional plans of action to prevent violent extremism, of course, upon request of member states. As we heard in numerous side events, United Nations entities such as the UNODC, UNDP, UN Women, UNESCO, UNEP, and others are supporting and delivering innovative capacity building projects to facilitate African counterterrorism efforts. The United Nations Counter-Terrorism Center in my office as a center of excellence and other United Nations entities will adapt our capacity building programs to reflect the priorities you have highlighted in this conference. For example, we will consider establishing an interagency platform in Kenya and other African countries to facilitate coordination of regional counterterrorism work, such as skill development and vocational training, prevention of violent extremism when conducive to terrorism, and the exchange of biometric and other information on foreign terrorist fighters, which can be provided to national watch lists and multilateral screening database. I also intend to deploy experts from my office into African special political missions, peace operations, and resident coordinators' offices to strengthen United Nations capacity building support on the ground and enhance counter-terrorism link between the United Nations and African regional and sub-regional bodies. My office already has an excellent relationship with the African Union through our joint memorandum of understanding. But I intend to strengthen our partnership further by establishing an annual counter-terrorism dialogue between the United Nations and the African Union, which will also involve African sub-regional bodies. This will help initiate practical steps to address the scourge of terrorism. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude by paying tribute to the enormous sacrifices that African countries and their peoples have made in the global fight against terrorism. We must ensure that these sacrifices are not in vain, but instead drive us forward to help build an Africa free of terrorism and violent extremism, which is essential for global peace and security. The evolving and transnational threat in Africa offers a real opportunity to rethink our strategies, align our action and goals, and pursue an inclusive approach. This African Regional Conference has set us on our way and given us a strong foundation on which to build. Thank you for your participation, and I wish you a safe journey home. The copy of this conclusion are available at the entrance. So thank you again for participation in this conference. Thank you for excellent exchange of views, and I announce the closing of the conference.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you. And as I said earlier, we are prepared to do whatever it takes to go forward.